She was America's beloved Ma Ingalls, the quiet strength behind the prairie's warmth. But behind the scenes of Little House, Karen Grassle was fighting a silent battle. And now, at 83, she's finally breaking that silence. In a recent wave of interviews, Grassle reveals the emotional toll of working alongside Michael Landon, whose on-set behavior, marked by crude jokes and dismissive attitudes, left her feeling humiliated and sidelined. For decades, fans saw only the wholesome family dynamic on screen, unaware of the pain Grassle carried beneath her composed exterior. Her revelations aren't just shocking, they're heartbreaking, and she reflects on the power imbalance and the courage it took to speak out. Audiences are revisiting the show with new eyes, and many are in tears. This isn't just a story about Hollywood, it's about reclaiming voice, legacy, and truth. Welcome to Past Paradise, where the past isn't just remembered, it's reckoned with. Karen Grassle finally opens up about her Hollywood struggles. Karen graduated in the 1960s with a degree in dramatic arts and English and worked in theater, including in England, before breaking into TV and film. She remembers a particularly low point, like after working with a Shakespeare company in England and teaching, she returned to the U.S., flat broke and uncertain of her career path. She landed the role of Caroline Ma Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie in 1974. Grassle said she was the only one called for the audition in L.A., and after reading with co-star Michael Landon, he supposedly jumped up and said, "Bring her to wardrobe." The show became successful, but Grassle's off-screen challenges were already mounting. Her memoir and interviews reveal she struggled with alcoholism. She began her journey towards sobriety in June 1977. She described the audition process early on as emotionally tough, like waiting among many women, comparing herself unfavorably and fearing failure. As the show climbed the ratings, Grassle sought a renegotiation of her contract. According to her, Landon, also executive producer, resisted giving her what she viewed as fair pay. "When the show was in the top 10, I said, 'Gee, it's time to renegotiate my contract.' Michael didn't want to pay me." She says his argument was something like, "The network has done some testing, and Ma is not the favorite character, so they don't want to give you more money." Karen Grassle reveals the untold truth about her co-stars. When Grassle joined Little House in 1974 as Caroline Ma Ingalls, her early experience was quite positive, like she felt welcomed and supported, especially by a handful of the production team and co-stars. For instance, she singled out Catherine McGregor, who played Harriet Olsen, as wonderful to work with. She also referred to the show's production manager, Kent McCrae, as the secret weapon of the series, someone she trusted and who made things work beautifully behind the scenes. As the show became popular, Grassle requested a renegotiation of her contract based on her role's significance. According to her, Michael Landon, who was both her on-screen husband, Pa Ingalls, and producer, resisted the raise. She states that he told her that the network did some testing and that Ma is not the favorite character, so she shouldn't expect a large increase. Grassle says, after raising the issue of pay, her working relationship with Landon changed. She described that her scenes were cut or reduced, and that Landon began making mocking comments about her appearance and value on set. Behind Landon, Grassle reveals she struggled with alcoholism during her time on the show, particularly influenced by the stress of working in such a constrained and pressurized environment. While this is not strictly a co-star revelation, it's part of the environment in which she worked among her co-stars. She admitted to a personal fling off-screen with guest actor Jill Gerard, who appeared in Season 4 episode The Handyman. She writes that his charisma hooked her and that the attraction developed behind the scenes. Karen Grassle reflects on the biggest challenge of her career. Before landing her breakthrough TV role, Grassle was struggling financially. She described herself as flat broke when she returned to the U.S. after working in theater in England. She auditioned for the role of Ma Ingalls on Little House and landed it in 1974. Although she initially accepted the role out of need, flat broke, she was cautious, as she recalled seeing the character as somewhat stern and limiting compared to her hopes for flexibility in her career. As the show became successful, Grassle began to confront what she later identified as perhaps the biggest challenge in her career, like the struggle for her voice and role amidst power dynamics and typecasting. This encompassed several dimensions, like how she felt underpaid and undervalued when the show became a hit. After her pay request, she says her screen time and storyline importance diminished. Karen later revealed she had wanted to develop a more emotionally intense story arc for her character, Ma's breakdown under pioneer pressure, which was refused by the producers. Simultaneously, she was dealing with alcoholism and the stress of Hollywood's expectations versus her own values. In her memoir and interviews, Grassle states explicitly that finding and maintaining her authentic voice while playing a beloved, iconic character under a production system where her co-star was also the producer was the most difficult challenge for her. She felt trapped between the character's legacy, production demands, and her own goals. Karen Grassle reveals what really happened behind the scenes. On screen, Grassle portrayed Ma Ingalls, the nurturing and resilient mother figure. Behind the scenes, she says the environment was very different, like long hours, power dynamics, creative control issues, and behavior that felt demeaning. She explains that in the era, 1970s, phrases like harassment weren't commonly used, so she felt frozen and unable to challenge what was happening. Karen says that after she asked for a raise, when the show was doing very well, the dynamics changed. Her screen time was reduced, storylines were curtailed, and she felt marginalized. She pitched a deeply emotional storyline for her character, Ma suffering a nervous breakdown under pioneer pressures, which producers rejected, and something she says would have been realistic but was shut down. The revelations highlight the intersection of being a celebrated mom figure in a hit TV show while personally feeling powerless in the production's power structure. Grassle's experience underscores how creative voices, especially of women in that era, could be suppressed, like how asking for fair pay or deeper storylines risked being punished. Her feeling of being frozen in uncomfortable situations shows how difficult it was to speak out at the time. She mentions that what happened probably now would be called harassment, but then she didn't have the terms or the support to respond. Despite the challenges, Grassle eventually reconciled with Landon before his death and now focuses on telling her story with honesty rather than bitterness. Karen Grassle finally talks about life after acting. After her run on Little House on the Prairie from 1974 to 1982 ended, Grassle noted that the big screen offers began to shrink, and she started reassessing her career direction. She admitted that many of the scripts she was offered post-show were similar, and a lot of the scripts were sent to me with people who wore a bun. Around the same time, her personal priorities shifted as she embraced motherhood, including adoption, stepped back from seeking top acting roles, and focused more on what she described as home and theater work rather than chasing the big screen fame. Although Karen didn't quit performing entirely, she gravitated more towards theater, smaller productions, and regional work rather than big Hollywood roles. On her website, she wrote, "Finally coming to roost here, I seem to be at home." Grassle also authored her memoir, Bright Lights, Prairie Dust, which allowed her to reflect on her full life, including her early career, the show, struggles, and life after the Hollywood spotlight. She took on roles that had personal meaning. Like in the film Not to Forget, she discussed how her mother's dementia gave her a connection to the story. Karen has spoken candidly about her sobriety journey, which began in 1977, and how that shaped her post-acting life. She also reflected on health, as for instance, she shared that she had a tiny bit of cancer, underwent treatment, and emerged cancer-free. Her reflections emphasize gratitude, perspective, and home life with the idea that the acting world was a chapter, not the entire story. Karen still acts, writes, and engages with theater, but it's on her terms now. Karen Grassle reflects on her most emotional TV role. In Not to Forget in 2021, Grassle played as Melody, a grandmother living with early-stage Alzheimer's in the film. She's spoken about this role as very close to her heart because her own mother experienced dementia, which made her personal connection to the role emotional. She described the emotional weight of switching roles from caregiver in her real-life family to the person needing care. According to Grassle's remarks, this role allowed her to challenge real-life feelings like loss, memory, and identity into her performance, which gave her the opportunity to explore deeper emotional territory than some of her earlier roles. In her own words, she said that the character's experience of confusion and change reminded her of watching her mother go through the decline and how helpless she felt. In The Guiding Light, she had a recurring role. Grassle mentioned in interviews on the podcast Classic Conversations that she had a recurring part on the soap opera The Guiding Light. This role mattered because it came prior to her major breakthrough and was part of her career buildup. In her interviews, she noted how challenging it was at that stage, like balancing ambition, the uncertainty of acting, and deciding what roles to take. Karen Grassle finally tells the story no one knew. Grassle explains that she developed a genuine closeness with her on-screen daughters, such as Melissa Gilbert, Laura Ingalls, and Melissa Sue Anderson, Mary Ingalls. She recalls walking with them on the dirt roads during filming, which didn't require mics, and using that time to develop an intimacy. She said, "Over the years, the bond the girls and I forged through our work and our off-camera times became so strong, it's lasted all these years." However, Grassle also reveals that after she began a contract dispute, seeking fairer terms for her role, the dynamic with Melissa Sue Anderson changed. She states that Anderson withdrew from the friendship and social times that they used to have, such as playing backgammon between takes. Grassle says, "I developed a reputation for changing and being difficult, and so some people pulled away. Why this matters is because it shows Grassle's willingness to engage as a mentor and friend to young cast members with a warmer, less reported side of behind the scenes. The subsequent strain highlights how even friendly relationships on set were influenced by power, contract, and career dynamics, as it wasn't only about scripts and scenes. The story expands our understanding of Grassle's experience and not just her conflict with senior production, but also how that rippled into her relationships with co-stars of different generations. Karen Grassle reveals what Michael Landon really meant to her. Karen regarded Michael Landon as an amazingly multi-talented person. She acknowledges that he carried heavy responsibilities as an actor, director, and producer of Little House on the Prairie. She said he tried to make the crew laugh and foster a pleasant set, especially early on. He was constantly trying to make the crew laugh and make everybody happy. Because of this, at first, he meant the promise of a great show, the promise of a meaningful role, her as Ma Ingalls, and the promise of respect in what seemed a wholesome production. When she asked for a raise, the producer resisted, and she felt her value as dismissed. Grassle writes that the so-called Ma character started to diminish. "As I held out for my money, Ma became the incredible shrinking woman. To her, Landon then came to mean control, gatekeeper, someone whose goodwill she'd relied on, but whose power over her career she now felt acutely." She also described instances of being humiliated on set, mocking of her body, and jokes about women from Landon and the crew. In other words, what he meant shifted from mentor to power person I must navigate around. She felt that she had to keep quiet because of the system. "I'd worked so hard to get there. To complain would have been career suicide." So Landon came to represent for her the cost of fame, the constraint of the industry, and the silent compromises women made. Despite the rift, Grassle states she and Landon reconciled shortly before his death. She said, "We had a friendly call about the good old days. I was glad we had that healing." Grassle opens up about fame, friends, and heartbreak. When Karen landed the role of Ma on the hit TV show Little House on the Prairie, Her life changed, like she went from relative anonymity to nationwide recognition. She recounts being discouraged just before the breakthrough. Fame changed the nature of her friendships. While some friends from the theater days drifted away, new relationships were formed, but not always on equal terms. She said in one interview, "The love that's come back to me since this book came out has been extraordinary. I did not know the impact that this character has had." She realized that being publicly known meant people looked at her through the lens of Ma Ingalls, not Karen Grassle, the person, and that sometimes created distance even with friends who had known her before. During the height of her fame, Karen reveals she was facing internal struggles, specifically alcoholism, inherited from her father, and depression. She writes the memoir largely to address that. In one significant moment, she described the emotional heartbreak of realizing that the persona people loved, the nurturing Mother Ma, did not reflect her inner world, which was feeling insecure and isolated despite the spotlight. She also discusses a tragic friendship heartbreak, and her father's alcoholism and subsequent death deeply affected her. She describes feelings of guilt and loss, and the challenge of reconciling love with pain. The combined weight of fame, shifted friendships, and personal conflict forced her into a moment of reckoning, and she describes that writing the memoir was 10 years in the making because she had to face these layers. Karen Grassle reveals life lessons from Hollywood's golden age. Grassle was cast as Caroline, a role that made her a household name. A lesson she gave was respect your craft. She treated her role with professionalism, learning that character depth matters more than fame. Karen emphasized that audiences connect with authenticity, even on family-friendly shows. She experienced tension with Michael Landon, the show's lead and producer, including being marginalized after requesting a raise. The lesson was to maintain self-respect. She learned that navigating workplace politics requires assertiveness without losing integrity. Hollywood's golden age could be glamorous on-screen, but harsh behind the scenes. Understanding human behavior and politics is crucial. She faced alcohol dependency during the show's run and pursued sobriety starting in 1977. The lesson is to prioritize personal health. Success is hollow if your well-being suffers. Hollywood's pressures can amplify stress, and self-care is essential to sustain a long-term career. Grassle encountered harassment like body shaming and professional undermining. The lesson is to speak up or set boundaries. While she couldn't confront everyone at the time, she encourages modern audiences to protect their dignity. Golden Age Hollywood was a male-dominated system. Awareness of systemic bias helps one navigate and push for fairness. Despite conflicts, she eventually reconciled mentally with past experiences, including with Landon before his death. The lesson is to forgive to free yourself. Holding grudges consumes energy and hinders personal growth. Learning to separate personal worth from others' behavior is a crucial life lesson. Karen Grassle shares stories from her early acting days. Karen was born in February 1942. She grew up in a middle-class family that encouraged education and creativity. She was inspired early by theater and music, performing in school plays and singing in choirs. Grassle attended the University of California, originally majoring in English before switching to drama after discovering her passion for performing. She studied classical theater and fell in love with stage acting's truthful emotion. She graduated with honors in 1964 and received a Fulbright grant to study acting in London. Grassle studied at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, LAMDA, one of the world's top drama schools. There, she was immersed in Shakespeare, Chekhov, and movement training. She performed in small theater productions across England, often unpaid but rich in experience. Returning to the U.S., Grassle pursued the stage in New York City and San Francisco. She appeared in off-Broadway productions and regional theater, sometimes juggling waitressing or temp jobs to survive. She recalled living in tiny apartments, riding the subway to auditions, and often hearing no. Grassle's television debut came through small roles and guest appearances. In 1974, her agent called her about a new NBC pilot, but she almost missed the audition because she was planning to leave for another project. She went to the audition last minute, met Michael Landon, and was cast as Caroline Ma Ingalls. Karen Grassle finally tells fans what really happened on set. When Karen Grassle landed the role of Caroline, she was a trained stage actress from Berkeley and London's Lambda. She described her first meeting with Michael Landon as writer, producer, and star as electric, admiring his energy, talent, and leadership. At first, she saw Landon as a mentor and a friend who cared deeply about the show's family message. Grassle's reflection was, "He was so charismatic. I thought, what a lucky break to work with someone so creative." Little House became an instant hit, bringing wholesome family stories to millions. However, Grassle began noticing unequal treatment behind the scenes. She earned less than her male co-stars, despite being the female lead. When she asked for a raise before season 2, Landon refused and allegedly belittled her request. Karen recalled, "I wasn't asking for more than anyone else, I was just asking to be valued." After this confrontation, she noticed her scenes were shortened, her role reduced, and Landon's tone toward her had shifted. Grassle later described the on-set atmosphere as increasingly uncomfortable. She said Landon began making gender jokes in front of the crew, often at her expense. At the time, the culture of the 1970s TV industry offered little room for women to speak up. Despite private humiliation, Grassle continued to perform with dignity and professionalism, maintaining the warm, loving persona of Ma Ingalls. Her ability to separate her private pain from her public role became one of her greatest strengths. Karen Grassle reflects on her legacy and life off-camera. After the final season of Little House, Karen quietly stepped away from Hollywood spotlight. Instead of chasing the fame, she returned to her first love, theater. She appeared in regional and classical productions across the U.S., including Shakespeare festivals and touring plays. Often chose roles that challenged her artistically rather than financially. Grassle's reflection was, "Theater was where I started. It's where I could breathe again." She also acted in television, films like Wyatt Earp in 1994, and made occasional guest appearances, but deliberately avoided typecasting as Ma Ingalls. Behind her graceful public persona, Grassle was navigating private healing. During her years on Little House, she struggled with alcohol use and something she later called a coping mechanism for invisible pain. She entered sobriety in 1977, maintaining it ever since. In interviews, she credited her recovery with giving her spiritual clarity and the strength to redefine herself beyond fame. In her 40s, Grassle fulfilled another lifelong dream, motherhood. She adopted a daughter, Lily, in the 1980s, describing it as the most important role I ever took on. Being a single mother while balancing work taught her patience, resilience, and unconditional love. She shared, "Playing a mother on screen taught me about warmth. Becoming one in real life taught me about grace." Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Grassle became active in women's empowerment and recovery communities, sharing her story to encourage others to seek help. She also began writing plays and essays, exploring themes of aging, resilience, and identity. Grassle has long said that storytelling on stage or on paper is a form of service. Decades after leaving Walnut Grove, Grassle began appearing at Little House reunions and conventions, reconnecting with fans. She acknowledged the show's enduring magic and how its wholesome values helped generations through hard times. Yet she also used the platform to speak openly about her real-life experience behind the scenes, like the power struggles and her eventual reconciliation with Michael Landon before his death. At 83, Karen Grassle finally reveals what Michael Landon did to her. Fans are in tears. Grassle was cast as Caroline Ingalls, the matriarch of the beloved Ingalls family. Her talent and professionalism immediately impressed Landon, who had a reputation for being intense and controlling on set. She later described the audition and initial filming as a mix of exhilaration and fear, navigating a high-pressure environment with a strong personality like Landon's. Karen described situations where Landon would push actors emotionally to achieve authentic performances, sometimes crossing boundaries. He could be very intimidating. He demanded perfection, and sometimes that pressure was too much. Grassle emphasized that, despite Landon's creativity, the environment could be difficult, especially for young or inexperienced actors. Grassle explained she remained silent for decades out of loyalty to the show, respect for the cast, and fear of public backlash. Grassle's revelation has deeply moved fans who have long cherished her portrayal of Ma Ingalls. Many expressed empathy for her candid discussions of Hollywood pressures, while still celebrating the warmth and love she brought to her iconic role. Social media and fan forums are flooded with messages of support, admiration, and gratitude for her courage. Karen Grassle finally opens up about her personal struggles. Despite her talent, she consistently faced rejection with the harsh reality that fueled both resilience and insecurity. Her big break came as Caroline, after nearly skipping the audition because she couldn't afford the trip. While the show made her famous, it also introduced a new layer of emotional turmoil. Grassle has openly shared that she struggled with anxiety, low self-esteem, and loneliness on set, especially as tensions with Michael Landon escalated over pay and creative control. Behind the image of TV's most beloved mother, she often felt isolated. "I'd play Ma with all the love I could muster, then go home." As her career thrived publicly, Grassle began battling alcohol dependency privately. She drank to cope with stress, perfectionism, and a lingering sadness she didn't fully understand at the time. In her memoir, she confessed, "I didn't drink for fun. I drank to silence the voice that said I wasn't enough." In 1977, she reached a breaking point and sought help through recovery programs, beginning a lifelong journey of sobriety. She credits that decision as the turning point of her life. "The day I asked for help was the day I started living again." After the series, Little House, ended, Grassle faced a painful reality. Hollywood saw her only as Ma Ingalls. Roles started to dry up, and she battled career stagnation and depression. Instead of giving up, she reinvented herself through theater work, performing and teaching across the country. With decades of sobriety behind her, Grassle began exploring therapy, writing, and spirituality as tools for healing. She said that her earlier struggles helped her develop empathy for others, especially women and creatives facing self-doubt. In public talk, she often emphasizes that recovery is not a one-time fix, but a lifelong practice of honesty and humility. Karen Grassle finally talks about her iconic role in Little House. Before Little House, Karen was a classically trained actress who studied at UC Berkeley. By 1973, she was broke and considered quitting acting altogether. Her luck changed when she was offered an audition for a new NBC family drama created by Michael Landon. She almost didn't go because she couldn't afford the airfare from New York to Los Angeles. "I was so broke I didn't even have the bus fare to the airport," Grassle recalled. Producers were so interested in her that they paid for her flight, and that decision would change her life forever. Grassle was the only actress to audition for Caroline Ingalls that day, a role based on the real-life matriarch from Laura Ingalls Wilder's beloved books. She said the moment she read the script, she felt an instant connection to the warmth and strength of the character. When she landed the part, she was overjoyed, but also overwhelmed by the idea of portraying a mother figure millions would grow to love. Filming began in 1974, and Grassle quickly became known as the emotional anchor of the Ingalls family, with the steady, loving heart who balanced Charles's rugged optimism with quiet wisdom. During the early years, Grassle described the cast as one big family. She developed genuine affection for the child actors, especially Melissa Gilbert, who often called her mom off-screen. She shared that filming on location in Simi Valley and Big Sky Ranch was both beautiful and demanding. Hot summers, cold mornings, and long hours in heavy pioneer costumes. Despite the hardships, she said those early days were filled with laughter and creativity, and were a time when the cast truly believed in the show's wholesome spirit. Karen Grassle reflects on her journey through Hollywood. Grassle's early acting years in New York City were marked by financial struggle. She worked in off-Broadway plays, taught dance classes, and took small television parts to survive. She described this time as a mix of hunger and hope. Despite the hardships, she built a reputation as a serious, dedicated actress, earning respect among theater peers, even if mainstream fame eluded her. In 1973, while struggling financially, Grassle was called to audition for a new NBC family series, and she nearly missed the chance as she was broke and couldn't afford the flight to LA. The producer, Landon, arranged for her travel, and she became the only actress to audition for the role of Caroline Ingalls that day. She said, "I walked into that room, exhausted and nervous, and walked out as Ma." The role changed her life overnight. She went from an unknown stage to a beloved face in millions of homes across America. As nostalgia for Little House grew, Grassle began reconnecting with fans through reunions, interviews, and conventions. She was touched by how deeply audiences still cherished the show and her portrayal of Caroline. "People tell me Ma Ingalls got them through hard times. I never imagined how much that role meant. These fan interactions helped her heal her old wounds, turning bittersweet memories into gratitude." Grassle came to see her Hollywood journey not as one of conflict but of resilience and redemption. Karen's journey through Hollywood was not one of overnight glamour but of quiet endurance, self-reinvention, and honesty. She transformed the hardships of fame into wisdom and the character of Ma Ingalls into a living symbol of grace. Thanks for watching Past Paradise, where Hollywood legends come home. If you enjoyed today's look into topic, at 83, Karen Grassle finally reveals what Michael Landon did to her and fans are in tears, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Got a star or story you want next? Drop it in the comments. Until then, keep the nostalgia alive, only on Past Paradise.